Superman Beyond Explained. Yeah, I'm making another Kaz argument again. It was all part of the plan, but you know what?
And the best part of this plan is, no one can stop me.
Too many people out there straight up lie about what the cosmic armor is, so I made it a mission in life to clarify it for those interested. You know, in facts, tons of IQ deficient scalers say that the Kaz can be destroyed by the Beyonder, or Lucifer Morningstar, or the presence is somehow above the Kaz. Y'all, just take a look at what the comic and the guide said. One day, the Overvoid wakes up and it sprouts its own sentient mind, and the first thing it does is get grossed out by the idea that something else exists. That something else is quite literally all of existence. It's a germ to the Overvoid, and the Overvoid hates it. This smudge here is everything and everyone that is not the Overvoid. The other name for this flaw is story, with no precedent. For the concept of story, Monitor Mind has no defenses. So all of story is this flaw, and all existence is this flaw. Everything not the Overvoid is a part of the idea of story, of data, of stuff in general. The opposite of stuff is the Overvoid. Total nothing, non-being, but really the entire concept of nothing is still not justifiably correct when referencing the Overvoid, because nothing is still a concept and the Overvoid transcends that idea. So the Overvoid makes a probe named Dax Novu. This probe is the corrupted part of the Overvoid that is peeled off and sent back into the flaw to investigate. The probe becomes Mandrakk later on. So the Overvoid hates the flaw, sends a part of itself to look closer, and after the investigator reports back to the Overvoid and says it's just awful in there.
It's awful.
It's all awful! It's all of it, and every single one of them sucks!
The Overvoid closes the flaw entirely that takes the form of a sealed idea that was generated by the Overvoid, meaning the Overvoid, after learning more about stories and stuff, personified the infection of the flaw as a suit of armor, because Dax Novu told the Overvoid a lot about heroes and Superman. So this visage of Superman became the barrier and seal for everything and everyone not the Overvoid. The flaw itself is sealed with divine metals. The divine metals are visually represented on this panel with a golden light around the cosmic armor. The cosmic armor's radiant design here is reflective of the Hierophant card from Tarot decks, which Grant Morrison happens to be a really big fan of. Keep this in mind because it's really important for something I'm going to show you later on. So the comic then says that the Silent Sentinel haunts Monitor and infects it with questions and pestilential crawling narratives. Again, remember, it was the flaw, all things not the Overvoid, that originally infected the Overvoid. But prior, the Overvoid had no reference point to understand what was even happening. This Silent Sentinel has infected the Overvoid with questions and narratives. Story infects the Overvoid with narratives because narratives are stories. Legend takes root and story, like contagion, spreads unchecked. So the comic tells us that the story is the contagion and the story is infecting the Overvoid. So after a certain point, after learning what stories are and understanding more about the infection after talking to Dax Novu about it, story, the flaw, the infection itself, is then personified as a suit of armor. The Silent Sentinel that infected the Overvoid with narratives is the cosmic armor. The word sentinel is a big guardian, one who stands by. This is visually represented by the Kaz standing firm as a silent sentinel that now represents the flaw itself to the Overvoid. So the cosmic armor is just how the Overvoid decided to personify all stories, all data, the flaw itself. Everything not the Overvoid is the Kaz. and some argue that editing this panel is the proper way to debate and discuss mythology, and I say to those people who say this, they're all brain rotted and need a smack to the back of the head. Sometime later, DC Marketing released a statement here that said that the flaw that the Overvoid originally saw was inclusive of everything that ever was, currently is, and that ever will be. It includes every future data point, concept, character, and story arc that hasn't even been written yet. The Overvoid has no limits. It knows and has seen every single anything that will ever exist, or that can exist, or that ever will be written that isn't written yet. That's what the flaw is. All of that is represented as the visual of the Kaz for the Overvoid and for the readers. It's an incredibly comprehensive story, and it's really a blueprint, not just for the Multiversity series, but for the entire future of the DCU as well. This armor is not a character. It's the embodiment of everything and everyone, every single character, every canon and continuity, every weapon, every new realm or villain that will ever be written in the future of DC Comics, everything in a literal sense embodied. The armor is placed in a fight to the death for its own right to live on, for all data and stories to exist or to die and be eaten by the hand of Mandrakk. The hyper story is the fight that the Overvoid forced them into. It's called hyper story because the Kaz is story itself being forced into its own ultimate story. Story wins and shoves a spear through the chest of Mandrakk, but why though? This is just a reference to the tarot card of the Hierophant and the scepter that it usually brandishes often in its illustrations. What does the Hierophant represent? It represents structured knowledge, which the raw data of existence, all stories, and the entire cosmic hierarchy itself also represents. Mandrakk wounded stories so much that it became blind to its own future and could no longer see where it was going. Robots don't bleed. Conceptual things beyond form and meaning don't bleed. This is why the Kaz was shown bleeding. This is a metaphor for the literal bleeding dry of the story that Mandrakk was eating, who the author said was sent in by the Overvoid to consume the literal narratives and stories of existence. It was Mandrakk's job to bleed story dry. The final crisis, as I saw it, for a paper universe like DC's was the terminal war between is and isn't, between story and the blank page. What would happen if the void of the page took issue with the quality of the material being imposed on it and decided to fight back by spontaneously generating a concept capable of devouring narrative itself? A nihilistic cosmic vampire whose only dream was to drain the multiverse dry of story material. Wonder Woman gets a moment in the story, but by that time Mandrakk has sucked out all the life of the story. The armor represents all data, stuff, things, existence, stories. Mandrakk, the erasure of all of that. That which is sent in to consume and delete data and stories. The cosmic armor is not beatable by anything or anyone except Mandrakk or the Overvoid, because everything and everyone else that ever was, currently is, or that will ever be written for all time in the future, are all already part of the cosmic armor. I really hope you enjoy this breakdown of Superman Beyond. So if you did enjoy this, please make sure to like and subscribe.